everyone, and welcome to Women in Literature 2021. This is a festival organized by Sabine Muzaffar, who is founder of Ananke, that seeks to celebrate the written word by women. I'm pleased to announce that the panel currently taking place is called Silence of the Lambs, Traversing Through Gender, Violence, Silence, and Heroic Masculinity in Fiction. The panel will discuss the notion of heroic masculinity as has been portrayed in literature, the journey of heroism, how it has been identified with masculinity, for example, the valiant Paris kidnapping Helen from the clutches of a tyrant husband Agamemnon, to its present-day interpretation that finds itself manifesting in feminism and femininity. The panel also seeks to explore how male writers entrench and female writers, on the other hand, debunk patriarchy and gender norms. Are gender-related issues and oppression depicted differently? The panel explores different perspectives of violence and women through works of literature with a special focus on Eastern societies. The discussion will closely look at silence as a social construct, its depiction and presentation in works of literature from masculine as well as feminine dimensions. In alphabetical order, I'd like to announce my panelists. I'll do a brief introduction. Aysha Baqir grew up in Pakistan. Her time in Mount Holyoke College sparked a passion for economic development. In 1998, she founded a pioneering not-for-profit economic development organization, Karvan Crafts Foundation. Her novel, Beyond the Fields, was published in January 2019 and shortlisted for Best Debut English at the 9th UBL Literary Awards. She was invited to launch her book at the Lahore and Karachi Literary Festivals and was featured in the Singapore Writers' Festival in 2019. Her interviews, book reviews, articles, and short stories have appeared in Countercurrent, Borderless, Expat Living, The Herald, Mount Holyoke Alumni Quarterly, The Kitab, The Tempest, and Singapore Writers Group Forum. She is an Ashoka Fellow. Next up, we have Farzana Doctor. Farzana Doctor is a Toronto-based author of 4 novels. Her poetry collection, You Still Look the Same, will be released in fall 2022. Farzana is also the Masi behind Dear Masi, a new sex and relationships column for FGMC survivors. She is also an activist, part-time psychotherapist, and an amateur tarot card reader. So everyone after this, book an appointment with her. Then we have Mahnaz Rehman. Mahnaz Rehman has been working as resident director at Audit Foundation's regional office based at Karachi since 2010. She is a known practitioner on women's rights and socio-political issues, having a journalistic background which adds to her strengths in terms of networking, liaison, and communication with media, civil society, political parties, and parliamentarians. Her experiential background while working with diverse institutions ranges from the media, the Al Khan University, and Church World Service, significantly contributed to attain the desired set of skills and competencies to serve her current leadership role as resident director at Audit Foundation. She attained high-level honors during her academic and professional life in terms of being the first female president of the Employees Union of a newspaper and senior joint secretary of Karachi Union of Journalists for 2 terms in 1983 and 84, and also has the honor of being awarded the Friendship Medal by the Prime Minister of People's Republic of China, Li Peng, in 1991 for promoting friendship of 2 countries through her writings. She got the Lifetime Achievement Award in 2020 by Sindh Commission on Status of Women, Government of Sindh. And then we have Shazaf Fatima. Shazaf Fatima is the mother of 3 children and author of 2 novels. She is currently working on her 3rd novel, To Even Things Out. She is exhausted. Shazaf, you make me feel good. Thank you. Ladies,
I love that bio.
I know. I feel so good about
I must also say that I'm not just the mother to 3 children. I'm a stepmom to one 14-year-old as well. So I have 4 kids. And I need to start thinking, because he's just started living with us. So I need to start thinking that, no, you don't have 3 kids, you have 4 kids, and that shift is taking a bit of time.
Well, Shazaf is mother to 4 children, and she is exhausted. Now, Aysha, I'd like to start with you. In South Asian culture, right, whether it's in the homeland or whether it's in the diaspora, there's a very strong, definitive trait of heroic masculinity, which is communicated through entertainment such as film, Lollywood, Bollywood, including Hollywood, drama, and even stories. And sadly, we see this happening in our modern novels as well, where the tendency is to portray women as the victims waiting to be saved. Why is there this need to pander to men to save us when repeatedly in real life, we actually see women standing up and coming to save other women, whether it's speaking out, whether it's taking action, or whether it's opening up avenues for progress? What will it take to redefine the gender rules, especially in fiction? And does it have the potential to change mindsets? Can fiction change mindsets? Aisha, you'll have to unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Got it. Yeah, thanks, Mehr. That's a really critical question. So, I think in my work in Pakistan, in the villages, especially South Punjab, from what I've seen, the society likes to package women. Either they're a mother, a sister, a girlfriend, a bad girl. And I think that's what leads to not understanding that women are capable of having more than one role. And that leads to a sort of a misrepresentation of what they're possible of and what their achievements are. However, having said that, I've seen both men and women sort of pull women down, and both men and women pull women up. I remember at one time there was this young entrepreneur who just started her work, and we were trying to wonder what would her family say, what would her husband say, because she was so busy with the orders. And her husband said, "You don't worry about it. I will cook, I will clean, I will do whatever it takes to support this woman in fulfilling her dreams." So I don't want to say that all women sort of support other women, or all women bring each woman down, and all men are sort of, supporting women and bringing women down. I think it's a bit of both in each. But I think what we need to do is to speak up about the multiple roles that women play, and how expressing their desires, and how sometimes doing okay, sometimes not doing okay. They can be a hero and a villain at the same time in different scenarios. But really, who's to judge? And why then do we judge women in that category, that go for, because she did this, she's good, and because she did that, she's bad? We don't do that to men. And sometimes I think it's because we categorize women and put them into boxes. She is a mother, and she is supposed to do this. When we get married, we're supposed to give up our work. We're supposed to then, cater to the children and cater to the husband. Why can't we do both? Many women are still doing it, and kudos to them. And I think there needs to be more of us, and there needs to be more of us in saying that it's okay and it's the right thing to do. Similarly, in violence, when it comes to sexual violence, and I'm reading an incredible book, How We Disappeared, about the comfort woman in Singapore these days, and it's by Jing Li. And how we say that, oh, because she was raped or assaulted, she's lost her honor, so that's it, that's the end of her life. Why isn't she a hero? She played her part in ensuring that she was there, and she kept her family alive through however she had to. She did whatever it took. Why can't she be looked on as a hero? Men go off to war, kill others, yet they return back with sort of, they're looked upon as heroes while having killed many others. But yet when women do that, they're often misjudged. So I think talking about ways to overcome this. One way is really to talk about it, and to talk about it at every forum and every panel that we do get a chance. And to take these conversations on our dining table, not just as panels, to take these conversations into schools, with your children and how you raise your children, to make it personal. Because unless we do make it personal, it's never really going to get out there.
That's absolutely right. And I love this idea of taking these conversations to schools and addressing young minds, which brings me to you, Mahnaz Saiba. Post-partition, this was a new country, but the mentality, the patriarchal system was still very much there. After the 1980s in Pakistan, despite the best efforts of pop culture, of feminists, women remained in the background, and instead of fighting back, there was this resignation of sorts to not challenge the state or society again. This was even more evident in literature, where we never saw the likes of a Babsi Sidhwa or Ismet Chughtai again. Why is this? What changed in the people? Urdu literature has a huge audience, a much larger audience than English literature. Why aren't there more female Urdu writers? And what's stopping them from talking about issues that our previous Urdu female writers had written about, whether it was sexual violence, marriage, homosexuality, politics, and many more topics? Mahnaz Saiba, sorry, you'll have to unmute yourself. That's all right.
Sorry. First, let me clarify, during Pakistan movement, the founders, especially Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the Quaid-e-Azam, I mean, he was a modern Muslim man of that time. And he encouraged women to participate in politics and to participate in the Pakistan movement. So we had those role models when our generation that was born after Pakistan, just after Pakistan came into being. So we had those role models. Fatima Jinnah was always with him in every political things, and then Shaista Ikramullah, Begum Jahar Anwar. There were so many liberated movements. Begum Jahar Anwar used to represent Muslims in London in conferences that were taking place. So women were quite liberated, but after the establishment of Pakistan, the religious lobby, they hijacked, because Quaid-e-Azam died very soon, just after 1 year. So they got the opportunity, and the society became, I mean, they hijacked Pakistan. They came up with their ideology. So even just after the establishment of Pakistan, Begum Liaquat Ali Khan, she established National Guard, and the women took those trainings, army trainings and all that. So, but then this religious lobby came, and then those martial laws came. Even the first martial law of Ayub Khan, that even then the society was very liberated as far as women were concerned. Because I remember my mother's generation used to wearing sleeveless blouses and all that, and the society was quite liberal till Bhutto's period. And you mentioned 80s, so we all know what happened in 80s. Ziaullah came with that dark night of dictatorship. So you see, I mean, the literature, the writer, the fiction writers, and everything, everyone is affected by the scenario. What is happening in your society? What is happening in your country? I mean, if you are in state of fear and you think that if you will say this or if you will write this, you will face troubles. Like nowadays we have this sword of blasphemy law, whatever. I mean, if someone is your enemy, whatever you write or whatever you say, they can misinterpret it and they can just put your life in danger. So people are scared. They can't write what they want to write. They can't express what they want to express. So it's the overall atmosphere, overall policies, overall the state attitude towards its citizens. These things make problems for the writers especially. And then of course there are ideological differences. Some people who belong to rightist politics, they support, I mean, there were some writers who supported Ziaul Haq, and they wrote things that, they kind of block the creativity process or thinking.
Yes.
So, I mean, when in Pakistan we look at the literature, we look at the women's situation, we can't ignore what was happening politically, what the state was doing, what the governments were doing. And the main, I think, problem was that the democracy was not functioning as it should have functioned in Pakistan. So these things affected our literature, our writers, our women, our religious minorities. So first of all, we should have pure democracy. I mean, we always fought for democracy. And democracy has 3 tiers. In Pakistan, it's very unfortunate that when we have even when we have democracy, we don't have local governments. Only when the army dictators come, they have those local governments because they suspend federal governments and provincial governments. So this is the contradiction in our society. And I think everything is political. Like feminists also believe personal is political. So everything is related to the politics that's being done. That's the policies of the government. They affect every section of the society. But as I always say that there are 2 processes to bring change. One is revolution, the other is evolution. Even if you put so many constraints, so many restrictions, but the process of evolution goes on. Like, this digital revolution, it has changed the society. I mean, I know in the beginning, people don't follow code of conduct or code of ethics, but even then, I think this social media is a great opening especially for young people to express themselves and all that, because that's a part of literature. Those bloggers have come, and some of the bloggers have to suffer because of they were expressing their thought. They had to flee from the country and all that. In Bangladesh also such things happen. So these are the things that happen when some new things come or some new inventions come. Or like our mullahs, they were against loudspeaker when it was invented, and they said it's forbidden in Islam. They were against photography and all, but now everyone comes on TV. All those religious people come on TV. So these things have their impact on literature as well. Like we had Faiz, Ahmed Faiz, we had Fehmi Daryaz. We still, thank God, have Zaida Hina. We have Kishwar Nahid, but these are very few in numbers. So to express themselves it depends on which society you are living, what type of society you are living in. And we know this religious extremism is so much flourishing. We used to say that at least Sindh is very peaceful and very Sufi type. But even Sindh, religious extremism has come and we are facing it. So these are the things that affect our literature as well.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with you with regards to the need for a healthy democracy and this concept of fear. I find fear such a crippling aspect when it comes to the written word. In fact, Farzana, I'd like to ask you, we have seen democracy struggle in South Asia, but in the West, where we have the diaspora who are living in a well-established, somewhat well-established democratic state, there are so many stories around South Asian communities. Honor killing, domestic violence, gender disparity, that the concern is that there can be no happy stories about South Asian communities, or if anything is written, it is seen as bringing about shame. Then how does one portray, I mean, how does one even tell a story, let alone portray queer characters or minorities in fiction without framing them as either stereotypes or caricatures, given that that is the trap, especially when writing about the diaspora and the issues that they face? I mean, and of course, the idea of shame is that it's synonymous with fear. How would you address that?
It's such a good question. And also, I'm just really enjoying hearing all of you. So, I read a recent statistic that in North America, something like only 5% of the books that are published are by those people who are racialized, right? And so I think that's probably the case in Canada as well. And there has been this increase in more racialized people becoming published and our stories getting out there. And of course, we have to write about everything, right? We have to write about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And in terms of, the concern that, well, there are always going to be these shameful, horrible stories. I think that, we as artists, as writers, have the ability to actually mix that up. So, my recent book that came out is about female genital cutting within the Dawoodi Bohra community, which is the community that I'm from. And, the premise, to say you're going to write a book about that, well, will you sell any books? It's very difficult. But, I made a real point of crafting this story with bits of humor and all of the other stories that go with that story. So stories about a marriage, stories about relationships with cousins, stories about activism, and all of those can be joyful stories too. And so I think that's how we mix things up. And in terms of the stereotypes, recently I was talking with a book club, and the only South Asian member of that book club asked me, were you at all concerned about like where the story would go and stereotypes and Islamophobia and all of that? And of course I was worried about all of that. I was worried about how my own community would take up the story, but I was particularly concerned about this book that is available in North America right now. What would the North Americans, the white North Americans in particular, and other North Americans who are not South Asian, where would they go in their own minds? And of course, you have no control once the story is written. Where you have the control is in your own editing and revision process. So I did my best, I did my best to try to write about this community in very kind of broad and diverse ways, because we're not a monolith, right? I wanted to present this issue of female genital cutting, from the perspective of people who feel that it should continue, and then as well from the activist positions and how they could influence each other. Because I wanted people to read the book, and I wanted people to maybe, if they were in kind of a messy middle place with all of this, be able to deeply, deeply think about these issues differently. And I think every time we talk about taboo issues, and I think any issues that have to do with patriarchy and dismantling patriarchy are taboo issues. And every time we do that, we normalize these conversations. And then, as Aysha was saying, they become conversations at our dinner tables. And then, social norms that we've never even considered before become ones that we can start to shift and alter. At least that's the hope behind it.
Absolutely, I agree with you. On that basis, that books are meant to be like dinner time conversation, Shazaf, I'd like to ask you that many of us who have grown up in South Asia or have some association with it, books are seen as a means of escape to faraway lands and encouraging creativity. One thinks that in the context of the Pakistani reader, and this may apply to other countries as well, books can be a means of finding validation, such as what Farzana was saying. You're writing about a particular issue, about a particular community, in the hope that somebody will read it and see themselves and find validation. Since we are living in a patriarchal society, our experiences as women are planned for us, and we are to just grit our teeth and bear it all in the spirit of sabr or patience or Allah madad karega, Allah, God will help you Consequently, we look for validation for our lives, and sadly, a lot of it is either found in a vicious cycle called misogyny, perpetrated by the patriarchy, or we find it in television dramas, you know, the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, and the husband, and you look at it and you think, well, if it's happening to them, it's happening to me, so it's all very well and good. Can the written word actually act a means of validation and encourage others to speak up if we are to take on more taboo subjects and change the narrative around them?
Yes and no, both. Okay. When I say no, it is because of two things. The first thing is that a book doesn't come out in a vacuum, it comes in an entire context. And what I can see in Pakistan is that people are only appreciating books. Now, this is a very controversial thing that I am going to say, but let me put my phone on silent before it starts ringing. The controversial thing that I am going to say is that Pakistani writers and readers only pay attention to books that Western readers like and read and review. All your festivals, they will only bring forth the sexy writers, the big names. Okay, so you have created, you have infiltrated. They've done many good things, these literature festivals, but a really, really horrible effect of them is that they are, the value of a book stems from where it is published, who has reviewed it, who has talked about it, and if it's a white person, great, validation received. So we are constantly looking towards the West, okay? And we are constantly, then the second part is, there are two very famous writers, and I'm not gonna take names because I'll be too controversial, this festival will blow up, have very publicly said, I don't read women writers because they don't write anything of value. And they've said it on stage.
Naipaul? Because I have issues with
Naipaul, but many people who have been inspired by Mr. Naipaul.
Yes, I know. Yes, Naipaul.
I think.
Yes.
But what I'm trying to say is that the fact that they can sit on a stage and say that, and nobody, you know, there are gasps of shock, and there's also like masculine approval. So you see that it becomes a boys' club in a way, which I think Dina Shah has written about as well. It becomes a bit of a boys' club. Or I don't think that, that's the controversial bit over. So that's the no. That can people get validation? No, because you don't know what a good book is, because you need someone else to tell you. And who is that someone else? Well, it's English, so the white people need to, or the Western readers, not just white people in the West who we consider white, or coconuts, like, you know, brown on the outside, white on the inside, but, you know, these kind of things, you know, being very, very crude, but very deliberate, because I think it's really important to take the bull by its horn. And the second thing is, I was reading about Hasina Moin, who is this dramatist who has inspired me, and she wrote progressive women in plays in the 70s and 80s. And, you know, she wrote very, very emancipated characters. She wrote her heroines were entrepreneurs. They were doctors. They had platonic male friendships. You don't see those characters even now on television. And you certainly don't see them, well, you may see them in some books, but not really, they're not the norm. And so once she was asked, how did you get away with all of this? How did you get away under Zia writing all of this? And she said, well, because I wrote humor, and secondly, I was a woman, so nobody took it very seriously. So they thought, well, while they were laughing, they ignored the subliminal messaging, but I got it across. So I think those are the two things that are really important, that you have that validation. There are two aspects, you know, when I read the brief of this panel, I wanted to read, sort of talk about this one thing that I find is really interesting, and then we can bring that back. I think that, but before that, sorry, I'm organizing my thoughts as I go along. you say that, you know, women are boxed in, but patriarchy boxes men in as well. There's this man box that they call, where the man has to be macho. Okay? He needs to earn. He needs to be ready to rape women. He needs to be ready to enjoy sex all the time. He needs to be on for it all the time. These are incredibly, and he cannot be effeminate. He cannot, for example, cook and clean like Aisha's friend who you were talking about, like he did. And I'll give you a small example. My husband is a very, you know, he ticks all the boxes in the man box, right? But he loves to cook, so he doesn't let me cook when he's in the house. And there have been a few snickers, you know, no, Shazaf surrendered the space to him, Asad's taken it over. So you have those elements. So if a man does not adhere to the man box, okay, he is also denigrated. And so I think that is very much a problem. And then I have now completely lost my train of thought. What did I say? What was I talking about before I talked about the man box?
You're talking about how you're talking about the portrayal of men and women, and Hasina Moeen and the type of character she
I wanted to
created,
talk
and
about
how
the
she
male
put
gaze.
this
Got it.
humor. Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. So I want you to read. So a long time ago, I read Deaths of D'Urbervilles, right? And there's this one part of it that it's called the story of a pure woman faithfully represented, right? And this is the narrator, the male narrator, talking about Tess, and he says about her mouth. He had seen nothing equal to her mouth on the face of the earth. To a young man with the least fire in him, that little upward lift of the middle of her red top lip was distracting, infatuating, maddening. He had never before seen a woman's lips and teeth, which forced upon his mind with such persistent iteration as the old Elizabeth simile of roses filled with snow. And then it is no doubt, and the critic says that, you know, you almost see the narrator wanting to enter her through her mouth, you know, and there's almost a violence, and eventually Tess is raped in the book, and there's all of that. So you think about writing, you think about the male gaze, you talk about the man box, masculinity, and the way that comes across in literature. It's there in almost every novel, and it's there in every show you watch. Okay, so what is being validated? That a woman will always be a sexual object. And we are living in the times of Bridgerton, right? We've all seen Bridgerton, and we've all read some trashy romances, right? And if you take an analysis of that, even there, it is consumed by women, but the gaze is still very much masculine, the woman's breast, this, that, everything else, right? And you're like, well, what's going on here? Because you are so entrenched, that gaze, that set, that patriarchal sort of lens is so established, I think, sometimes, that it's almost not noticeable. I'm done. I don't have anything else to say.
Sorry, I was just completely mesmerized. I was just thinking of what you were saying, and it's all soaking in at the same time. But it's interesting you say that you know the portrayal of men. In fact, Aisha, I'd like to ask you this question: that given how you know Pakistani entertainment, for example, revolves mostly around rural areas such as the Shan, Rima, Maula Jat in Lollywood films, PTV dramas surrounding Sindhi Vaderas. Again, upholding what Shazaf has said, that the idea of what a Vadera should be. I mean, heaven forbid he's a nice person. And Punjabi villages. There's also the concept of, I mean, do you remember this Punjabi couple, Sona Chandi, the drama? The husband and wife the husband and wife duo who were friends and they solved problems together.
It was a very progressive relationship.
Yes, yes. But then on the other hand, you also have these commercial ads such as the dalda ghee and the woman standing there, you know, the concept of a beautiful village. And of course, we've all thought at one point that the woman needs to take the dabba and just throw it at the husband's head and just walk off set, right?
Yeah.
We've all felt that. Why is it that, you know, when it comes to rural areas, there are these stereotypes. You're either this or you're that. And with men especially, anything like Sona Chandi was quite revolutionary in its portrayal of a male rural man. What is stopping people from breaking the rural stories? As progressive as a rural setting could get. I mean, God bless him, poor guy. He tried his best. But
So,
when it comes to
Mehr, I'm going to let you on a secret. I worked in rural areas from 1998 to 2013. That's over 15 years. And all the myths about rural areas were shattered in that time. If you think, the stereotypical dramas about them, how they're supposed to be, how to do everything, how conservative, what they're supposed to do, what they're not supposed to do. Oh my God, you have no idea what goes through the mind of the rural woman and what she does and what she gets away with it. And nobody knows. This is what we want them to be. This is what is almost the producers are wanting, that they will be able to sell to the masses, but it's not what's happening. Your woman,
saying about what's going to sell. Is the story going to sell?
but your woman is working hard. She does talk when she wants to. She steps out when she has to. She takes on what she has to. And even girls, they are, they're clever. They're real entrepreneurs. They really break down myths that we have been told about how the rural are supposed to live their lives. And I think if all of these plays are now being made to portray them, it's because we're almost trying to maybe go back to an imagined past that never really existed. And we think there are going to be solutions there, rather than looking at how women are contributing, how outspoken they are, what kind of work they're doing along the men. This is not to say that there is not violence, and this is not to say there's not discrimination. It absolutely is. But what I'm also trying to say is there are voices, there are strong voices, there are brave women out there. And it's up to me now whether I want to focus on the three, books that sort of undermine women, or the two books that talk about how women are brave, and how I choose to utilize my voice, what books I read, what books I talk about becomes important. Because if I'm in my capacity validating books that are about strong women, brave men who dare to challenge the box they've been put into, then I'm doing something I feel that is worthwhile, rather than going and saying, talking about books that do not make sense to me, because that is not the way I see life. So every one of us has a role to play. Next time, a drama is being discussed, one just needs to sort of pipe up and say, well, this is not, or this is right, because we have voices. And how we choose to use our voices on platforms like this, which are brilliant. I mean, these are platforms that need to go out, that will be viewed over and over again. So the books we need to be talking about, the authors we need to be talking about are those who've actually challenged the myths. And just going back to that one point, rural women, they are braver and stronger than what you might think, really.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you, which brings me to you, Mahnaz Saiba. My work in development has often led me to have, discussions in my office, and this is a recurring thing. Every time I bring it up, there's always this groan and eye rolling. She started again. This is the thing that I don't understand. The development sector, whether it's Pakistan, India, all over the world, wherever, it has a plethora of information concerning women and their plight. Yet so much of it, in fact, all of it, remains factual and is confined to informative reports or facts or figures, and it goes up as a statistic. And I fail to understand, I fail to identify, and perhaps this is a fault on my part. What is the obstacle to creating narratives around these women that can actually humanize them and carry their stories to a wider audience? Is it the attitude of, well, this isn't going to change, or this book isn't going to sell? Or is it the need for authors to ignore it in the hope of a happier existence, that yes, we know women are struggling, yes, we know this is happening, but can we please have something light to take our minds off? I firmly, and this is, I mean, I genuinely believe, and in my line of work, I've seen this happen, that if you take stories, real life stories, and you put them in a format that appeals to people on a mass level, it does have an impact. It will change, and it can be owned by the youth. For example, 65% of the Pakistani population is under the age of 40. This is a very, very young nation. And the fact of the matter is that this young nation, they're, they're keen, they're hungry. My generation, we grew up in the shadow of 9/11. Our life, the past 20 years of my life have been hounded by 9/11. And then I look at the younger lot, and they're hungry for change. They want something different. Why are we not taking these stories, these statistics from the development sector, and turning them into narratives that could at least be taught at school level, even if they're fictional? What's the obstacle? What's preventing it?
Let me be honest, because you see, as a development worker, or if you are running a development NGO, or if you are working there, it's such a time-consuming job. I mean, it's such a hectic job that your creativity or your writing skills, I mean, you have to keep them aside. This is because I have been working in NGOs, so I didn't get time to write. I mean, I could have written many things, but these NGO jobs, they're just like, same thing happened to journalists also. Because first I was in journalism, and before that, I mean, during my college life, I had started writing fiction and short stories and all that. But when I came to journalism, the creativity ended, because I had to translate from English into Urdu, and then you see, very few journalists keep on writing fictions, because journalism is also a very time-consuming job, and so is the NGO job. So some of us, I mean, either they do this writing as an assignment, I mean, if it is in your job description, or if you get a project, and I have to be very honest about it, because in NGOs, if you get a project, you have some deliverables, you have to deliver those things, then you will do. And usually the projects are like not of writing. So that this is the real obstacle. But some of us are development practitioners who are not workers like us. I mean, they chose a way out, like they became consultant. So they had time, and like I will give the example of Rubina Sehgal. She has written so many good books, and I have a list here, some names for you. That is engendering the nation state, aspects of women in development, deconstructing terrorism, discourse and death in Pakistan, Talibanization. I mean, she did very fine research and wrote. And the other name which I want to mention is Afia Shehrbano. She has written so many books: Faith and Feminism, Feminist Politics, Social Movements, Class is Dead, but Faith Never Dies, Gender Governance and the Inconvenience of Sexual Autonomy in Pakistan. Asma Jahangir, she has written a book, Subverting Their Sex, Women's Resistance to Sexual Violence in Pakistan. So these friends, I mean, they are our young friends from the women movement. They are part of Women's Action Forum, but they chose to be, you see, researchers, and they didn't like us, they didn't do full-time job, because NGO job is not 9 to 5. It's 24-hour job. If you are in that sector, you must be knowing that. Same thing happens to journalists also. So in other countries, I mean, writing is a full-time profession. I mean, they just write, they don't do anything else. But in Pakistan, to earn your living, you have to do something else, and you write because it's your passion, or you are committed to something, like your ideology or to feminism. If you are committed feminist, you will write no matter what you are doing. But these are the realities that in Pakistan, or maybe, I don't know, I think in all South Asia, the writers don't get money for that. In Pakistan, to publish a book, is you have to pay from your pocket to publisher. And then, yeah, this is the main, I mean, and especially the Urdu writers, they are from middle class. I mean, it's very difficult for them. They, I mean, save money and they hardly get chance to get their books published because publishers don't give them anything to Urdu writers. The English writers are luckier, I think, but I don't know. No, okay, Shazaf is saying no. So, I mean, this is the problem with writers. So these some friends that I mentioned, like Rubina Saigal, so they became consultants. So and they are writing. And the other fellows who wrote, they are like from academia, or they are PhD scholars. That was their part of their thesis. They had to write that thesis, so that came in form a book, and they were useful for us because their topic was like honor killing. Nafisa Shah, her PhD topic was honor killing, so we got a good book from her on honor killing. And there are others also from academia who managed to write, because in universities you do get time for writing, but in development sector as an NGO worker, it's very hard to write a book and do your NGO work as well. Very difficult.
No,
This is the obstacle, yeah.
absolutely. And there's only so much that one can do. I mean, massive respect for all that you do. It's so much. And then to expect to write a book on it, it's even more difficult. Farzana, I'd like to focus on a particular book of yours that I think is incredible. Totally fangirling over here. Stealing Nasreen. You tackle homosexuality, gender, marriage against the backdrop of a religious community. The relationship between the three characters, Nasreen, Salma, and Shafiq, peel away to reveal those hidden facets of people, traits, and characteristics that as South Asians, we are not even allowed to admit to ourselves as individuals. I often say this, that South Asian women in particular, when we're in our 20s, we're actually living out our teenage years. And when we're in our 30s, we're living out our 20s, and so on and so forth, because we're so suppressed, right? I mean, when you wrote Stealing Nasreen, what was the intention? And did you want to open up a dialogue that can address topics surrounding sexuality and gender, and just getting people to acknowledge things about themselves? I mean, some of the most liberated people, South Asians that I know, they are now realizing things about themselves come our mid-age. What was the intention for Stealing Nasreen? And it's really sad. I mean, it's nothing to be happy about, but at the same time, it's wonderful. But it's also sad.
Well, thank you for the compliment. So Stealing Nasreen was my first novel, and with first novels, you're often just writing for yourself. You don't even know that it's going to be published. I didn't know it would be published. It was just a project I was working on, and eventually I had enough pages, and I, worked to try to get it published. So at the time that I was writing it, I started writing it just after or just before 9/11. So I was thinking a lot about the context of, living in Canada, 9/11, Islamophobia. It was a very bad time. I mean, it's still bad for Islamophobia, but it was a very bad time right after 9/11. And so at the time I was really thinking about, what are the books that I would like to have read as a younger person? What are the characters that have always been missing for me? So queer characters were always missing for me. So that was a very important part of the story. And then I also wanted to write about the underemployment of new immigrants, because that's such a big problem for our communities here, and how racism plays into that. So, part of my aim was I just wanted to write, and then I had also kind of the activist hat on, wanting to explore these issues. And I would say, like, writing the queer characters at that time when it came out in 2007 here, it was also a little bit difficult. You know, that was around the time that civil rights for queer people were still emerging. You know, and so people were still living under some, you know, some difficulties and fears about their own safety. That still exists, but we have the civil rights today. But back then, you know, I just wanted to make visible a topic that is invisible. And I think that's been my mission all along, is to try to shine a light on, you know, people and communities that are marginalized, and in doing so, hoping to shift our narratives around all of this. And I really think that fiction can be quite a change maker. I know that I read fiction to be able to develop empathy about situations and people and communities and worlds I know nothing about. And so, you know, that's my aim when I'm writing these subjects as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Farzana. We're, you know, in the last leg of our session. So Mahnaz Saiba, I'll start with you. If you'd like to share any thoughts, anything I may have missed out, or anything specific you would like to talk about?
As you were saying about writing in development sector, so in their reports, they do include case studies or success stories. So if we could take out all those success stories or case studies and publish it in form of books, that will be the thing that you want people to read. So I think, but as I said, that and you do according to projects only, but if they could do it from their reports, they could take out those case studies, and because there are some very good case studies. So
Absolutely.
that could be done. That could be.
Mahnaz Saiba, it should be done. It should be done. Like I said, this is a young population, and they're a lot more keen on learning about the past. I mean, this is the population that is technologically, I mean, they're whiz kids. Social media, like you said, has opened up a whole new platform altogether. So why not? Why not have these success stories? Why not show the rural women in their resilience? Like Aysha said, nobody knows about them. People still
Yes.
think they're these downtrodden, broken down women. And of course, there's poverty and there's hardship. Of course, that's a reality of it. But they're also witty, they're spunky, and they can make progress. I am an example of that. I come from a rural background. I mean, 2 generations ago, we were sitting in Charpaiya in the middle of a village in Jhang, of all places, the backwater. And here I am today. So it can be done. But thank you, and I'm so grateful to you for your thoughts. Aysha, would you like to share your thoughts, please?
Just taking that point forward, some time back, an exercise was done in Karwan where the team actually went back to the women to have them express how they felt, and you'll be amazed at the literary, emotional language. And it was extremely powerful, and I've talked about it in the keynote also. I read it and I was shocked. So, you know, taking women's literature forward, I think one step would be to just go back to the women whose stories they are and to have them express it the way they want to. I heard their voices and I put out whatever there was in Beyond the Fields, but I think they themselves have such a genuine tone to what they're feeling.
Absolutely. In fact, I'd just like to say that I did translate one of these case studies, and it's available on the Karwan website. I strongly, strongly encourage everyone to read the story. It's by Kulsum Bibi, and honestly, I mean, I have done other work as well, but this is something that will stay with me forever. Shazaf, would you like to share last thoughts, please?
Yeah, I'm just sort of, I think it's one thing to say that, you know, all of these stories, that all stories should be brought out there. Who will bring them out there? This is a very, very
Sure.
sort of pragmatic approach, but who's going to publish them? Who's going to distribute them? If we're only
Well,
talking about,
some of us publishers are setting up new things. There was a
no,
panel on
absolutely,
publishing earlier,
absolutely,
and this is what
absolutely.
I
What
was
I'm trying
asked,
to say is,
distribution and about the government, and I was just like, done.
Mehr, I totally, and I'm very well aware of your journey, and kudos to you. But you, of all people, know the problems.
I know it's hard.
Okay, and the thing is, And I think it also comes down to, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk in Urdu, Farzana, and then I'll translate it. I'm going to say कि हम ऐसी कौम है जो कॉफी पे 800 पैसे 800 रुपए कर लेंगे लेकिन किताब नहीं खरीदेंगे. We will spend 800 rupees on coffee, but not on a book.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And also the medium by which most people effect change is the visual medium, I would say, more than the written medium.
Yes.
And I feel like the problem here is that your middle class is dwindling, and most of the people who are your intelligentsia, who were your brains, have either died out or are dying, or they have moved country.
Yeah.
And I also the other thing is that your distributors are actively working against you because they don't want good stories, because the powers that be, the people who buy your books, the people who want to read your books, want to hear a particular narrative.
Yes, absolutely.
It is over here as well, because today the UK government has said that institutional racism does not exist in the United Kingdom.
Oh, it does. It does.
They have issued a report that it does not.
So in private schools, it does.
So I'm trying to say is that voices are shut down.
Yeah, they are.
And I think it's important to bring that aspect of the lens
Absolutely.
under this.
Absolutely. And one can only do what one can in one's capacity. But Farzana, would you share your thoughts, please?
Yes, maybe I'll just add on to what Shazaf said, is that I feel like as writers, we have a responsibility, and also as readers. So, you know, it's our role to amplify the voices that we want to see in the world. We want to amplify those stories. So, you know, finding ways to lift other writers up who are doing this work, I think is really important to me.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for this forum. Thank you so much.
Not at all. The credit goes to Sabine. It was her idea. And I'm so grateful to you, Mahnaz Saiba, Aysha, Shazaf, Farzana. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. I certainly have a lot to think about. And Shazaf, some of us are working on it. Don't worry.
Yes.
Don't worry. Sabine, over to you.
Thank you, Mehr. Thank you, Farzana, Shazaf, Mahnaz, and Aysha. Thank you for participating and adding so much value and learning for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.